Do I have you on audio still?
Can you hear me now?
Yep. And then we'll get your slides up. All right. Let's see if this is going to work. All right. I got one more thing, Andy, because they gave me unlimited power before I let you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble!
All right, Andy, I'll let you take it away. Thanks.
If you guys don't know John, he'll turn everything into a karaoke moment if he's allowed to. So I appreciate that. All right, I'm Andy Piazza. I am going to be giving a talk about civilian integration tips for all you knuckle dragging veterans. Stole this idea from CONUS Battle Drills community on Facebook. I think they have their own kind of blog site now. They have a whole series of these fantastic pictures. I have edited out the bad word here because I know there's some Air Force members here and I didn't want anybody offended. But their albums are full of fantastic transition, civilian transition tips like this, integration tips. But really, this is about how we think about being a veteran, how we speak about being a veteran, and what we can use from our experience to be positive in our workforce and in our careers, and probably hit on a little bit of being negative because sometimes I get a little ranty, especially as I'm already on my second monster of the morning. As you heard, as John and I were BSing, I'm a senior director of threat intel at Unit 42 within Palo Alto Networks. Previously, I was global head of threat intel at IBM X Force. Long time before that, I was a government contractor for 10 plus years, great company called FIA in Northern Virginia area. If you're looking to do government contracting work, check out the FIA family, PHIA, fantastic group of folks over there. Tell them I sent you. Um, Before that, I was in the Army for a little over 8 years. Joined the Army in 2003 to be EOD. I was 20 years old when I went to MEPS, I think, or 19 when I went to MEPS, and they're like, "Hey, kid, do you want to blow shit up?" And I was like, "Absolutely, this sounds fantastic. Make a career of this." Showed up to EOD school with about 8 dudes from boot camp, and they said, "One of you guys might graduate." We're like, "Nah, man, we're all sticking together." Yeah, we all stuck together when we failed out. I know 2 people in the 6, 7 months that I went through that school. I for sure know of 2 people that actually made it through, and probably the 60 or 70 kids that I tried to go through with. So really, really hard school. Learned a lot about myself through failing. It was the first time I really had to try hard at something and did not have the skill set to do that, or the kind of the study habits to do it. Failed out, became an MP, went back to Fort Leonard Wood where I had done boot camp, went there for MP school. And about a week before we graduated, they said, "Hey, Piazza, we got your orders in. Welcome to Fort Leonard Wood." So I went across the street to the 463rd MP company and immediately went to Iraq about 6 months later. Spent 2 years in Baghdad. I've actually been on combat patrols with the now former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, who was our brigade colonel at the time. Um, Politics aside, whatever you think about him, I will say he really enjoyed combat and spent a lot of time outside the wire. Actually, done a few patrols and kicked in some doors with his squad. So um, had a lot of fun there. So I volunteered to go back 6 months later. So I spent 2 wonderful years in Iraq, mostly to get out of Fort Leonard Wood. Not the best place to be a single soldier. Great place to get in a lot of trouble as an MP as well, since it's the home of the MP school. And then my next 4 years, I was at INSCOM at the Army's Intelligence Security Command headquarters at Fort Belvoir, where I was in charge of force protection. So the MPs that guarded the building. There's one of those notes about like being a veteran is you'll never have as much responsibility as you did in your 20s. I can think about like leading squad in combat in 2006 at 22 years old, I think I was. And then I was in charge of security, well, at least the force protection platoon, 24/7 security for the Army Intel headquarters at like the age of like 25, 26, right? Um, but a lot of those things that I learned throughout that time really, really have helped me in my career. Some of the things I learned in my time have been a detriment to my career, and I had to relearn some skills, like not using the F word all of the time, only when sometimes appropriate. Um, Since then, though, I made the transition to cybersecurity. I was a security specialist when I first got out. So badges and clearances, kind of what John was talking about. Why you should volunteer for conferences. We have the skill set for standing around and checking badges and being mundane type of tasks. Well, that was kind of what I did from a security specialist perspective. I got really lucky, and I was around CIO shop. Used to be called OSD CIO. Eventually, would get sucked into DISA. Then I went to the Secretary of Defense Communications Office as their security manager. Was doing traditional side of security, but was on the IT security contract. Finished my master's in intelligence studies. I got interested in that by being around the Intel headquarters. So I finished my Intel master's, started on get an undergraduate certificate in IT security, and my CEO at the time was an analyst by daytime on our contract. Looked at me and said, "Hey man, you look bored," which is always a scary thing for your CEO to say to you. But gave me the opportunity to go over to US CERT to be a threat analyst. Back in the early days, the predecessor to CISA. So went over to US CERT as a threat analyst. Started working on the master's program, knocked out a whole bunch of certs. As I mentioned, kind of as we were talking about certs and career stuff, I would not get all of those certs. Normally, it was only because I was through the SANS master's program, which is a fantastic program. And by the time I was done with it, I got to sit for the GIAC security expert and earned the GSC number 344 because they're each numbered. I think they're around 400 or so people with it now. Fantastic program, fantastic challenge. If you're going to do a master's anyway, it's a really great program. Since then, though, I have became a threat hunter at the Postal Service, jumped around to a bunch of different places. I was a deputy project manager for a couple of different contracts I was on. I'm also really heavy involved in the community. I'm operations lead for B-Sides Northern Virginia. I'm now a DEF CON department lead this year. I ran the contest department, which is absolutely insane and a huge opportunity and a lot of fun. Great exposure to all kinds of chaos and planning. And 2 years ago, I earned my DEF CON black badge, which I'm there chewing on like it's the Olympics. But really, it was just because one of my Army skills was it taught me to drink a lot of beer, and that's how our Acro Jeopardy team won. We drank a lot of beer. You earn points for that. So, all right. So, career transition, civilian transition stuff for veterans. I don't want to say everything that I learned in the military was bad, but I think we overemphasize our veteran status a lot. So for my first point here, nobody cares what you did in your last unit. You might have heard that if you ever PCS'd and keep talking about your previous unit a whole bunch. Well, that's really true when you come out. Like everybody kind of gives you the nod that you're a veteran, but nobody really wants to see your DD-214. Unfortunately, we all got our blankets printed and all of that, and we had 500 copies locked in our safes. But outside of maybe getting a fishing license and a couple of other random ass things, nobody wants to see your DD-214. Nobody really cares about what you did in your last unit. Nobody really wants to get down in the details. And I'm not saying like don't be proud to be a veteran. Absolutely be proud to be a veteran. Sometimes you'll get the chance to sit down with your coworkers and tell some stories, and they'll be absolutely amazed. But like being a veteran and can't be your whole personality. If you've ever worked with that person, especially when I got out in like 2011, I would say like 2011 to 2020 time frame, like there was just way too many of us, I think, coming out, and we just became our own meme, right? Like the affliction shirt, the grunt style shirts, like Black Rifle Coffee, like it went from like being really cool to being a veteran to like we just saturated, at least from my perspective, like my social media and culture to the point where we became a meme. Like we became there was the negative side of it where the almost like GI Joe Karen, like I deserve my Applebee's discount. Like we joined to serve, not to be served. So if you have any sense of entitlement of what you think you deserve, like cut that shit out immediately. Like you're not going to be the teammate that anybody wants to work with. I see veterans coming out and they're like, "Oh, I've got 8 years of leadership. I should be this vice president role." Well, there's a handful of us that might be able to pull that off when we first get out. Most of us are probably going to have to start over or start a lot lower down in the totem pole. So just kind of like check yourself and check what you think you deserve. Like you've got to earn your place in every role you go into in every organization. So just remember, like nobody cares what you did in your last unit, or like nobody cares what you did yesterday. Like you have to show up every day and show like you deserve to be where you're at. Um, Again, I don't mean this as a negative thing, but like nobody wants you to be, GI Karen talking about what you deserve and you've earned because you were a veteran. Like again, served. We didn't sign up to be served. So don't have that attitude, or you're not going to go very far in your career. Um, I will say, like, I'm guilty of this too, right? I tell a lot of stories about where I was. That's part of it. Part of that for me though isn't about like credit. It's just like I learn through stories, and so I try to tell other people's stories. I think there's a big difference between that. But like making your previous role your whole personality is not going to get you very far, and people will get sick of it pretty damn quickly. Uh, Next point, embrace the suck, right? We get told that every day. But really, like, I'll flip this around and translate it like be positive change. It's more than just embracing the suck and staying in the suck, but really it's an attitude of remembering that situations can suck, but our attitudes don't have to, right? I try to tell my kids this all the time. I try to remind myself this all the time. Just because a situation sucks doesn't mean our attitude needs to suck. When our attitude sucks, it just makes the situation worse. So if we can be positive in crappy situations, right? We've all slept in the mud. We've all gotten dirty. Again, maybe not our Air Force friends, but they've probably been in Army barracks. That was them embracing the suck. Like we can go through difficult shit, but we can stay positive and we can make the situation better. So when you're in a team out here in the civilian world and everyone else is complaining, start being positive and you'll watch the culture around you shift to being more positive as well. We don't, the more we just kind of roll around in the mud and get complacent and complain, like it just brings the whole organization down. Don't be the person on the team that's always nagging everything and making everything more negative. Like every single day, we have a choice to be a part of positive change. And that leads into like improving our foxhole every day, right? Just like from an attitude perspective, we don't want to accept negativity and we want to be positive. From an organizational function perspective, we don't have to accept the status quo. Like how many people hate when you ask somebody why we're doing something a certain way and they're like, that's the way we've always done it. I don't know about you, that irritates the shit out of me. Like we can improve our situation every day, whether that's um, tweaking our SOPs, our processes, or all the way up to like, hacking our bureaucracy, right? And actually getting positive change for our organizations, starting at individual and the team level and organization level. It's absolutely super important that we always do this. And sometimes it's going to be really hard. And sometimes it'll actually be really easy. I've been in a number of places where I realized like the team I was on was very self-limiting. I give you examples like, hey, I want to change something. I bring it up to my teammates and like, hey, do you think we could do this thing? And my buddy says, no, probably not. 6 months later, someone else asked me, hey, can we do this thing? And I go, no, because I asked my buddy, not because I asked leadership or any actual decision maker. Like I asked the wrong person and we just accept that no. But like I had to change my own mentality with that. I saw that a lot when I first came out. I was accepting like these organizational no's from my peers. And then I realized we were being very self-limiting. And when I started pushing back and actually trying and go up a level and go up a level and continue to escalate, I realized most people said no because of either fear for change or laziness. I'm not gonna lie, especially in the government contracting space, like there's a lot of teams I was on in the federal space where the contractors were trying to do the right thing, um, but federal teammates aren't exactly incentivized to change, and that can lead to real stagnation. But like, I refuse to accept that. I get bored easily, so I want to continue to improve the organization. And I found that if you like develop a proof of concept, whether that's my case back in the day, it was Microsoft Access databases. Um, for you, it might be some code or some type of website, whatever that proof of concept is, and you can show people that they're way more accepting when they can actually see a visualization and they can see that it's making their job easier and like the work's already done and they don't have to be the one that's doing the work. So the easier you can make it for somebody else to see and adopt the thing, the more likely you are to actually improve that foxhole every day. Um, if you love this mindset of like actually getting shit done, Highly recommend the book Hack Your Bureaucracy. If you've if you've been a veteran for the last 10 years and you've noticed that the VA website and services, digital services at least, have gotten a hell of a lot better. One of the authors of this book was actually, I think it was her role was like the first CTO at VA, if I remember correctly. I know she served in the Obama White House, but it's an absolutely fantastic look at how to change organizations to get shit done. One of the examples is like you go all the way up to like the policy level and you actually find out hard coded in policy, like you can't get an exception to this thing. She's like, all right, well, guess what? Policies get updated every 3 to 5 years or whatever. Become a part of the policy review team and get the thing changed. Like that's the absolute extreme is when you got to wait 3 to 5 years to change an actual government document or corporate document. Reality is most of the time when you're hacking your bureaucracy, it doesn't take that long and it doesn't take that much effort. But as a really, the whole book is just full of a bunch of great examples of getting stuff done. So now, like when you go to the VAs, you used to have to like maintain your address across education benefits, health benefits, the main website. Like you had your account in all of those things. Um, Her team is one of the ones that got that fixed. So technically, your identity is singular across all of the VA services. It was a really good example of like hacking bureaucracy. There's a bunch of other ones in that book, but really highly recommend listening to it or physically reading it if you still actually like physical copies of books. Um, the other thing for me, one of the ways I've learned to hack my bureaucracy, especially in agencies, government agencies that were slow to adopt new ideas, or they had a lot of internal politics where one branch chief doesn't like another branch chief. One of the things I would do is use thank you notes, like strategic thank you notes, where say I don't like, or my branch chief doesn't like John's branch chief, but John helps me out on a project. Instead of like sending John a thank you email or just telling him thanks because we're friends, I will send or get my boss to send a thank you note to his branch chief and outlining, hey, here's the things that we did. Really want to appreciate, say thanks for their contribution to this project. And now that that boss has been rewarded and recognized for something that they might not have agreed with wanting to do in the first place. And so they're more likely to support you in the future. Also, like John, hopefully that those kudos rolls down to him as well. And now he's more likely to support us in the future because like what's better than being thanked, from a peer is being thanked from your boss. So if I thank that boss and that rolls downhill, now both that boss and John are more likely to support me in the future. So does it sound a little bit manipulative? Absolutely. But that's the only way to get shit done in certain cultures, right? So those strategic thank yous have gone a really, really long way for me. The other thing is I use these like I call them like a team win too, and so might in those thank yous might outline like what we did, and it's something like when you escalate it to those bosses, you outline like how the project went, and you're thanking certain people. I've also seen those emails then go up the chain because they'll want to forward it to their boss and get their own attaboy from their leadership. And I'll usually save those off as like a PDF or a document out on the share drive. So the next time we're coming around for quarterly or monthly metrics, we can pull those out as kind of a vignette. And instead of just being like, we built 50 widgets, we can say, hey, we built 50 widgets or we got this project done. And kind of here's a synopsis. And so those team wins kind of help document the impact of the team as well. And again, it's all about like getting more likely to get the support you need in the future. Um, some of the other ways I've seen kind of hacking a bureaucracy is a team I was on at least once a year. We would shut down the team for a week. It just meant we weren't doing all of like the normal daily or weekly meetings and stuff as a team. We just retrained all of our SOPs as if we were all brand new analysts. We used it with real world data. So we were an intel shop. And so we were producing intelligence bulletins. Actually, it was the US Indicator Bulletin that I think CISA still publishes. The team I was on was the ones responsible for those at the time. And once a year, we would just sit down, go through our training, go through our SOPs with the branch chief or the team lead was in the room as well, all the contractors involved. We would train how we bring stuff in, and we would update the SOPs right there on the fly in the training room. And because we were using real world data, stuff that we needed to work on anyway, us shutting down for a week of retraining didn't negatively impact our metrics. In fact, when you looked at our annual Intel production metrics, you could see the spike when we did our training because we got more shit done because the whole team was focused on our actual day job. And what was really cool is, so we bang out more Intel product than we normally in a week, and we would tweak the SOPs in our favor. Either new tools that had come on board in the last year that hadn't gotten documented yet, or someone learned a new process or piece of the process to make things hit faster and a little bit better. Um, and so we would tweak it right there throughout the year as well. And that team was, I would argue, probably one of the better, more mature teams. And joking aside, I know I've already made two knocks on the Air Force. I will say the team lead on that is a Fed. She was a former Air Force officer and one of the best leaders I ever worked for as a civilian. I was a contractor. She was W civilian. No, as I joke, it does not actually pain me to say one of the best leaders I ever worked for as a former Air Force officer. Tony's a badass over there at CISA. I learned a lot from her. One of the things we did though is not just that annual training. To her credit, she also liked to improve our voxel every day when it came to processes. So if someone came up with an idea and said, "Hey, I found this. If you log into VirusTotal, you can actually see the signatures that detect this as well. Maybe we should add this in the Intel product." Like, we would make the SOP change throughout the year, send a nice formulated email across the team, and basically adopt the standard that week. And so we were actually tweaking and making our organization better iteratively as well, not just waiting for that 1 year mark. Um, so yeah, recap, thank you notes, retraining the team once a year, pretending like everybody's a noob, and then being able to ad hoc change, but making sure that those ad hoc changes are sent out, like documented properly, the SOP gets updated. That's critical. There's nothing more frustrating than finding out something was changed and not documented, and you're only found out because someone pushed your work back and said you did it wrong. You're like, what do you mean? I followed the SOP, and like, oh, that's outdated. So if you're going to make those changes, make sure you're updating your infrastructure, your documentation and stuff to support that, right? I mean, like process infrastructure, not necessarily technical infrastructure, and that's well communicated. Some of the biggest frustrations I see in teams is when leaders forget to communicate changes and then they try to hold people accountable for it. That shit's pretty frustrating. So yes, I worked in a couple more of the CONUS battle drill memes for you. This one's actually cyber related. All right, the next one, consider this your video game cheat code. One up, one down, one left, one right. So you think about it, if you're ever in a fire team, I think most military units do this, but you learn the job of the people around you, right? So when I was a driver in Iraq, I had to know the role of my team lead, and I had to know the role of my gun. I had to get up in the gunner's turret, be able to function the machine guns, right? The 50 cals and Mark 19s and all of our favorite toys. I had to be able to be a functional gunner. I had to be a functional driver. I had to be a functional team lead. And had to be a functional, backseat princess if I rotated into another truck, right? So learning the jobs around us was a critical skill in a fire team. It's an absolute critical skill as well in your career. I will use Intel as an example because I'm an Intel nerd, but like understanding what our, the SOC analysts need, the stakeholders need, versus the risk team versus the CISO. Side note, if you're a threat intel nerd, CISO is not your only stakeholder. In many cases, they're probably the least important stakeholder because they don't move security needle quite as much as a detection engineer or an incident response team. So understanding what those other roles are and how they work, it's critical in understanding what kind of data they need, right? If you're a SOC analyst and you don't understand how the detection engineer writes new detections or deploys new detections, or even scarier, what gets filtered out from the engineers and the detection engineers before it even comes into the sim, like that is a huge blank spot in your knowledge, and you don't even know. Like, I'll give you an example. Most people don't realize most organizations don't collect all of the authentication logs from endpoints. Many organizations only collect them from the domain controller. Well, if you're regularly logging in and out on your machine or locking your screen and going to lunch, like every time you log back in, that's not actually hitting the domain controller because the credentials are cached. So if you're in a SOC and you don't understand how your logs are collected and what you're collecting, and you say, show me every time Andy's logged in, you're only getting domain controller logs. You're not getting those endpoint logs. You're not answering that question honestly and accurately. And so you need to understand how is your information biased? And so talking to your security architects and your security engineers and understanding what's actually being logged and coming into the system. Or you've got Windows Event Collection or Sysmon out there collection. They are likely filtering out a lot of things like, I know for sure in our rules, we filtered out all of our scanners, which is a fantastic idea. So your logs don't blow up every time, Nessa scans your environment. But understanding how those other teams work can help you understand how your data is biased if you're a SOC analyst or incident response analyst or hunter. If you're a threat intel nerd, like I said, understanding what the incident response team needs is critical to being able to support them. I supported a large enterprise organization. The IR team never engaged threat intel for the first year or two I was there. I went and got coffee with my buddy. I said, Jay, why don't you guys ever engage us in your IR? And he's like, well, you never give us anything useful during the case. I was like, whoa, that's a punch in the gut as an intel guy. So what do you mean? He said, well, we tell you we got a Qbot infection. 2 weeks later, you give me a white paper that you wrote about everything you know about Qbot. Like, I didn't need to know that Qbot came out in 2012 or whenever it was first coded or what coding language it was encoded in. Like, I need to know what's going to help me in incident response. I was like, what does that look like? He's like, well, day one, we got to tell the CISO that we've identified and contained all the machines. So give us technical information that would help us identify and contain all the machines. Of course, my nerdy intel brain was like, indicators of compromise. And he's like, sure, that's a good first step. But what else would help him was understanding how the malware does lateral movement and persistence. So if we can get them the indicators and kind of the fingerprints of what lateral movement and persistence looks like for that malware family on day one, now the IR team can tell the CISO, yes, we've identified and contained all the machines. That allows them to go to bed that night and pick up the work the next day and not get completely dragged out and cracked out on monsters. Incident response fuel right there. So talked to the TI team. They gave us IR gave us a chance. The next case they had, the first thing we did was pushed over persistence and lateral movement techniques that we were able to pull out of reporting for that malware family. One of the things we were able also to figure out was, because we were the threat hunt team within TI as well, if IR is looking at the systems they know are impacted, we can help them run hunts and scope the rest of the network to see if they missed any machines. And then it became this collaborative process where we identified machines or they identified indicators, passed them to us. We would continue to help scope the network, and we actually became part of incident response. And then when it came down to brief the CISO, it was the two teams briefing together, not like it was two completely separate cases. If you've ever seen an incident response engagement get briefed and then the TI people brief their side of it, and it sounds like two completely different briefings, that's got to be frustrating as shit for your stakeholders, and especially the CISO, who's usually an audience member for that. Like, for the first time, it was like IR would be briefing and be like, yeah, we saw the infection on these 3 machines. They look over at TI, and TI would be like, yes, and we hunted and we identified these 2 others and we passed those to IR. And this became this very collaborative conversation. And now the organization's really getting their bang for their buck out of this team. We're not wasting a bunch of time and money. And we're not fighting each other for attention either. We're being supportive of each other. So learn the jobs of the people around you. That means, if they're hosting a brown bag session, go attend it. Go grab coffee with them and ask them what the hell they do, right? See if you could shoulder surf with them. If you can actually if you're in a company that does job rotations, jump in the job rotation. Especially, I highly encourage everybody to go spend time in the SOC if you've never spent time in your SOC. My greatest problem with cybersecurity overall, there are way too many people in this career field who have never been responsible for security operations or the security of an enterprise. You can usually identify them because they start advice with the words like just enable MFA. Like, that's not a huge challenge for some organizations, either expensive or technical debt or just another thing in the backlog on the risk register they got to deal with. So, if you hear the word just, that's usually started with really bad or uninformed advice. But go spend some time in the SOC. Spend some time with your stakeholders, either grabbing coffee or hosting brown bags yourself. One of the things we did at US CERT as well when I was on that team, I brought the idea to Tony and she approved, was we started doing brown bags, I call peeling back the layers, where we showed them our processes. I showed them what our stakeholders sent us, showed them how we triage it and brought it into our kick-ass Microsoft Access database, how we wrote our Intel bulletins and enriched it with Firestone were in passive total back then before Microsoft killed all the value of passive total. Yep, I took that shot. Um, show them our whole process is. And funny as enough, first time we did it, guy who sat next to me, other side of the cubicle, we had a little glass wall between us. Had coffee with this guy regularly. He sat in a brown bag and was like, "Dude, Andy, I had no idea that's what you guys do. I've got a pile of data over here you'd probably love." And I was like, "Oh my god!" Um, but it was through these brown bags that we learned. They learned what we did, kind of the one up, one down type of thing, or one left, one right in this case. He sat next to me, and then I spent some time shoulder surfing with him and learned what his job was. We learned a whole lot. So huge opportunities there to just be a better teammate and become a huge force multiplier for your team by just learning the roles of the people around you. Don't ever burn a bridge. You don't absolutely have to. InfoSec is a very small community. I met John Stoner probably 9, 10 years ago. I knew of him through, I was on the DHS information sharing team. Stoner was on the DoD side of it, very similar function on his side. We met, I think, officially through B-Sides Nova, but was aware of him. Mick Bacchio, sorry, Mick, I already butchered your last name, even though I've known you forever. Was in the Pentagon the same time I was in the Pentagon. Met through friends, right? And now all three of us involved in VetSec. Got the opportunity, obviously, here to keynote with you because of knowing John. Um, our community is critical to us. And it would be really easy for me to see, John 10 years ago with his purple mohawk and dismiss him because he likes karaoke too much or Dungeons and Dragons, whatever. I give my friendship. Um, but he's become one of my best friends over the years. And we've done a lot together career wise and community wise through that. And you have no idea like who's going to be important in your career down the road. Like I said, during the career conversation before this started, going through the Sans Mastery program and being very out on Twitter and social and stuff online and networking led to my opportunity to be the most pompous title I will ever have in my career, probably the global head of threat intel at IBM. Was through just getting to know folks and not being abrasive online when I didn't have to be, not burning bridges when I didn't have to be, um, and really just kind of building a community around me and really networking. Um, there's a lot of infosec drama, and it's really easy to see the negative side of infosec drama, especially on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call, Blue Sky, Mastodon, whatever. There's absolutely a lot of positivity in this community. I'm part of a sharing circle of friends that we have a dedicated fitness channel. We've got a friend who um, went to the gym for their first time without their trainer, and like it was just so cool to see how positive we were in building up that community and building up that individual as they were terrified to train without a trainer for their first time because going into a gym can be really intimidating. Like there's just so much negativity. It's just really cool to see the positivity, and this community can be really, really, really cool. Um, when I left US CERT after 4 years. I went to the United States Postal Service. There was a number of times where Postal was one of those environments where the govies didn't like to bring their contractors to meetings, especially external meetings. And there's a number of times where we had to jump on, or they had to jump on calls with US CERT before it was CISA, and they'd be like, "Oh, hey, didn't you steal Andy from us? You should go talk to him. He's the guy that built this program that you've called us about." Um, and it was just one of those bridges that came back to me that gave me an opportunity within the organization I was supporting to look like a rock star and be a SME on something where they were going for external advice, and they turned out the guy who built the program that they were reaching out about was sitting right next to them working for them. I also had it where uh, you ever try to get his an account and the right accesses, it can be quite a pain in the butt. Homeland Security Information Network, I think, is what his stands for. Don't quote me on that. But when I first got to Postal, they were having trouble getting their HISN account squared away. Well, you got to go like to an info at type of email address, whatever. And I was like, oh, I could just reach out to my buddy Jason over there. And actually, one of the guys over there I used to butt heads with a little bit when we were internal about how we did access control for our US CERT stakeholders. But because I knew him by name and I never got angry enough that I burned that bridge, I was able to reach out to him and get a bunch of our accounts squared away pretty quickly. Um, and yeah, it was literally a dude I used to butt heads with, but I changed roles and now I needed him and I was able to leverage that relationship because I had burned the bridge. And I'll say too, in InfoSec, sometimes you may burn a bridge and not know about it, right? Not even realize it, and it bites you in the ass. Sometimes you might feel your ass get bitten, but not know who done it. There are a lot of sneaky, creepy people in this field, but the more positive you can be, the more you focus on improving your foxhole, the more you focus on being a great teammate, right? The one up, one down, one left, one right, the less likely you are to burn some of these bridges. Just be positive. Like I said, first point I had, the more we can be a positive teammate, the more like people want to work with us, like the further our career is going to go. Um, Build your community, join CTF teams here as you're doing stuff like VetSecCon or at your local B-sides, join a CTF or volunteer. Like you build those relationships. Even if the person's weird, be nice to them. You never know how they're going to help you in your career in the future. But yeah, don't ever burn a bridge unless you don't have to. All right, I know I'm talking fast like always. I'm already at my recap slide, but it's all right. The Stoner and I can talk career stuff all day after this. So just recap, right? Nobody cares what you did at your last unit. I don't mean that as a negative statement. What it really means is what you do next matters. What you do every day matters. Don't be GI Karen, be GI Joe, and actually be a part of the team, right? Take it from embracing the suck and be positive change. Improve your organizations every day. Um, be positive when things suck and be the teammate that people want to work around. People want to work around a person who is a realist, like, hey, this sucks, but we can kick this thing's ass. We can take that hill. It's going to be hard, but we can do it. Don't be the one that lies to your team and yourself all the time, but being realistic but staying positive. Improve your foxhole. Don't accept the status quo. You can change organizations. Some organizations are like steering the Titanic, and it's going to take forever. You might hit the iceberg. Others, they are nimble, and you can make quick changes. Learn the job of the people around you. Figure out how to collaborate and coordinate with them to be a force multiplier. Again, that positive attitude from earlier steps is going to go a long way there. And don't ever burn a bridge you don't have to. InfoSec's a very small community, but in my opinion, that's a good thing. That's how I've gotten many opportunities. That's how we're going to continue to get opportunities. From a career perspective, getting your first job in InfoSec is one of the hardest things you'll probably ever do, just because, especially this time in of life right now, the community is impacted with layoffs and just really weird shit going on with the adoption of AI and shrinking market and all that. But once you're in your career, like you're going to get so many opportunities for people who want to work with you because you were a badass in the previous place or they heard about you through friends. This community can be a really, really good opportunity to get new jobs by being a badass and being somebody that people want to work with. Last one before we wrap up. I'm going to go work out, and that made me think of this funny ass one that I also stole from CODIS Battle Drills. That I'll pivot over and see if we have any questions. I am Killer Grizz on Twitter. Go back to my first slide. It's got all of my things. Killer Grizz on Twitter, LinkedIn, just Andy Piazza. Easy to find.
Thanks, Andy. That was great. Thanks for being here this morning and spending some time with VetSec. Andy and I do go back a long way. There's a funny story in here as well, which we didn't cover. I knew Andy. I knew he had worked at CISA. Here I'm at Booz Allen at the time. I was like, let me reach out to my network. We're working on this proposal to try to win some work over here. And I reach out to Andy, and he's like, don't think I can help you on this one, buddy.
Yeah, John and I were both bid on a contract on competitors for the exact same role. I would say his company won the contract, but the feedback was we had the better technical approach and personnel. They were talking about me.
Yeah, it was very funny how small the community is. Just it was like a particular example. So one of the other things, Andy, that I was talking to, I had a non-military mentee at Google, and she asked me this question. She was like, how do you sort of like, she was like, how have you been really successful in all of your different roles? And I sort of went on this diatribe about like how I try to deliver the absolute best results of whatever is asked of me, right? Like my standard that I hold myself to is like so high, whether it's even if it's just a PowerPoint or, whatever it is, like in all the different roles I've had, like I try to deliver this gold standard. Now, sometimes I don't have enough time to do it, which is always frustrating, right? I don't have enough time to hit my standard, which is something, I deal with. But like how have you, like, what's been like one key nugget for you in like trying to set yourself apart from everybody else in similar roles?
One thing I think, especially anybody who's served has done a lot of stupid shit, right? They don't embrace the suck. Uh, Especially those that have been in combat and nearly died, or in training and nearly died, because they don't always train the safest ways. I had an engineer actually when I was at IBM. One of the guys that worked for me asked like career advice, and I was like, "You stay calm during crisis and stuff." And I was like, "Well, no one's trying to kill me." And I was like, "Okay, that's not the best advice because you shouldn't go out in an environment where people are trying to kill you." But I think the best way to reshape that is realizing that like today's emergency is very rarely ever tomorrow's emergency. Like think about how many crises you've had in your life that lasted more than 24 hours. And so like if you can hit a sleep cycle, most of the time shit's not that big of a deal the next day. And so just stepping back and realizing like, hey, we missed an OKR date. Anybody die? No, right? Is it going to be a crisis tomorrow? Probably not. You're probably going to have another vulnerability to deal with the next day. Um, I kid. Um, but realizing like most emergencies are a 1 day emergency, like very, very few crises are multiple days. Very few crises that we deal with are life or death too, really. Like even on a bad infection, unless you're in a hospital or, critical infrastructure network, most of the time it's not life-saving shit. It's a bad day, but you can get through it. And just remember, like we've probably been through worse. There's a fantastic book I'll look up here in a second, but The Comfort Crisis. It talks about how our perspective, the more comfortable our lives get, the less variance there is between comfortable and uncomfortable. And so, like the thing that makes us uncomfortable today, oh, my AC isn't exactly adjusted to where I want. It's not 130 degrees inside my Humvee, though. But in my mind now, because I am so comfortable, fat, and happy as an old man, that 73 degrees is uncomfortable when I want it 71, right? That's like the comfort crisis that we live in. And so I think it's us as veterans is just remembering that perspective of sure, it sucks, but it sucks by today's comparison, not what we did when we were 20 years old.
Yeah, that's great, Andy. I love that. I've definitely discussed this with many people and Mick and my therapist, comrade. Um, where like, it is interesting, regardless of how long you served, right? Like even if the hardest thing you did was like boot camp or whatever, right? That is so unlike what most civilians have ever had to experience, right? I mean, we've talked about having to go back into a college setting with 18 or 19-year olds where like to hear their conversation about like what the most terrible thing is that they've ever had to deal with. And you're like, I was in a war zone, right? Many of us have that experience, or just the fact that you serve or you went 2 days with no sleep on staff duty, right? We have done things like outside in the rain, sleeping in the forest, right? Like all this stuff that the average veteran has had to experience will be helpful whether you're in cybersecurity or not. Like obviously we have people in here that not all of you are in cybersecurity. Hopefully you're interested in trying to get into like the tech field. But this is a good perspective to keep in mind. And this can help shape how you think through your career in the long run as well. Like we had a really interesting talk yesterday from the GitHub CEO who was at DHS CISA before it was CISA, Andy. She reminded me a lot of some of your stories. Um, and in like trying to keep a calm head, right? Try to understand that things could be worse, but it's probably not the end of the world. Yeah. So we got a couple more minutes. Any other questions for Andy in the chat? I'm trying to see if anybody posted anything in our Q&A.
But John, I really like the point you made too about, you can walk away from an org without burning bridges. I have seen bad exits. I've seen bad exits from good friends of mine, right? Like, and it just, makes it really hard in the future to ever recommend somebody for a role. Right. I will tell you this, John, but for everybody else, when you apply for a role, especially in a small community, it is very often one of us is getting pinged on Signal. Hey, do you know Mick? do you recommend Mick? And you might get the reply, I love that guy, but professionally, I can't recommend him, right? I will 100% professionally recommend Mick, just to be clear.
To be
But
clear.
like, just to be clear, Mick specifically, John, not so much.
Fair.
But that shit happens behind the scenes, and you will have no idea why you got blocked from a job. Like, it is absolutely critical that you're always respectful and that you never burn a bridge you don't have to, even when you leave a very unhealthy organization. Leave on the right note. You never know who else is in that organization. Like, it's really easy to pass on SZA. There are some badass, absolute great practitioners there that I would snatch up in a heartbeat. There are a lot of great leaders there that are doing phenomenal things despite the bureaucracy of being a government agency, right? Like, so it's easy to put them all in the same bucket, but the reality is, when I left, it would have been easy to burn those bridges. But like, I still know folks that says, I think I've been gone for 8 or 9 years, right? And I still work with them. I work with JCDC in my current role. I get on calls 8 years after leaving, and there are familiar faces that I've had coffee with when I was a contractor. So it's just like absolutely critical that you leave on a positive note, no matter what you think about the individual personally. Like, professionally, you may end up still having to work with them. So
Yeah, this is a mistake I've definitely made. I have that Italian blood. I've tried to calm down a little bit. It's helped as I've gotten older. But we're passionate. A lot of us are really passionate. So like we can get really frustrated, but you want to be really careful to not burn bridges with people or organizations. I have been employed at Booz Allen 3 times. I'm a 2-time comeback kid. Right. So like you always want to leave on a positive note because in the MilGov DoD space, right, a lot of those same big contractors have a lot of roles, right? The Lockheed's, Boeing's, right, GDIT's, Northrop, Booz Allen's, like you may leave a role and in 5, 6, 10 years go back to that same company, right? But you do not want to be on the do not hire list, which I discovered I could just see at Booz Allen the second time I was there. It wasn't properly secured, by accident. Don't end up on a list like that or like this, de facto list where people know you in the community and are like, oh yeah, I was at this event and this guy was an asshole to the organizers or something, right? Because then that will get around and that can impact your employment opportunities. Because if you're like that at an event, then like, what are you like at work, right? So you really want to be careful and be considerate of everybody. And I think part of this is just being a nice person, right? Like, I don't know that we've specifically talked about this yet, but like some of us in the veteran community have issues. I hope you get treated for all of your issues, whether they're a physical issue or a mental health issue. Mental health is health. But you want to be a nice person, and you're going to have to learn how to integrate and be nice to even people you disagree with in the civilian world. Like you can't just tell your random coworker, F you. Like that's not going to be a constructive strategy. If you don't have a good relationship and you're joking around, that's one thing. But like you can't operate the same way that you did maybe like in a deployed setting. I've lost your audio, Andy. I don't have you. Did your headphones die? Oh, nope. NSA got Andy just like it got Nicole when she said attribution doesn't matter. They were like, we can't have any of that talk. I don't know, Andy. Maybe that's a wrap. All right. Andy, thanks so much for your time this morning. I'm glad we got through everything while your audio still did work. I'm sure I will see you again somewhere very soon. Thanks so much. I appreciate your time. All right, we got a couple of minutes before we have Christopher Huller's pen testing for noobs talk. We're going to take a quick break and end the broadcast, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes, and we'll get Christopher up here. Thanks, everybody, for being here on our fourth and final day of VetSecCon 2025.